Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz here on a Wednesday night, as always, coming to you to talk some Supercoach, answer your questions, go through my team, everything that's happening in the Supercoach world. And there's a lot going on because there are a lot of trade options for us this week. Before we jump into that, as always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular the YouTube, Spotify. Get in touch with us via X Supercoach Insider 100 and Swizz 26 for me directly. Ben and Chris, as always, will have their team discussions. If not via the YouTube, it'll be via the they'll update via X, especially Chris. As we always say, it's a bit of a fluid situation when it comes to some of our teams, and there's no difference to this week. For me, Carlton and Collingwood don't change a huge amount. So a lot of my discussion, it'll be more around you guys tonight till I see final teams and then make my final decisions there. Josh, thank you for jumping on straight away there, mate. I do have the NRL dashboard up just because I'm obviously doing fairly well in there. So it's going to be a very interesting, say, next 20 weeks. But we'll get in obviously AFL one. But yeah, while I'm doing good, we'll keep updating there and then we'll keep flicking over to the obviously the AFL. But yeah, that is for those people who are interested how I'm going from an NRL point of view. AFL climbing up the ranks, as I said, it's a these things happen. The kind of the bad start, but just as more setting up my team how I want to long term. So scored the 2,000 points last week, which was pretty good. I was actually pretty annoyed because I was flying coming into that Freo West Coast game and not having Murphy Reid, and he obviously had a massive score. A few people would have had him on the bench instead of Nevitt, but obviously Nevitt been named sub, so that put them ahead. So I think there was a couple up against a few mates. One scored like 2001, another one scored 2003, and slightly got over the edge of me there. So that was a bit disappointing. But yeah, I moved up and now into the top 10,000, and hopefully that'll keep climbing bit by bit as my team is starting to get where it wants to get. So that is my situation at the moment. And if we have a look at what my team kind of looks like, and then we'll get, obviously, as I said, this is more about for you guys, projections, everything like that. Obviously, I haven't made my trades yet, but for me, that back line is starting to come together. So Zorko, Sinclair, Sheasel, and Roberts. And in the flex is short, but he will be most likely leaving my side this week, as long as nothing else disastrous happens between now and the next sort of 48 hours. We've got Reid and Trainer, who were timely scores for their rookie, and we'll talk a little bit about them. I've got Bice there, and Liam O'Connell might be the one that makes way now that he's kind of got that concussion and injury from the Mansell situation. So Roberts will obviously not be the captain. He just took his score last week, so I'll talk a bit about captains and stuff later. Midfield kind of looking all right, but it'll be a little bit weakened because I'm more likely to make a trade out of there this week. I'm very tempted to move on Connor Rosie. Currently sitting there with a break even of 122. More importantly, outside of this week, a couple tougher games coming up in that fixture for him, and the fact that Butters is back now, I'm not kind of loving it so much. So after St Kilda, Hawthorn, the Swannies, they get a little bit of relief with North Melbourne at home, and then it's Bulldogs out at Mars. They've got a Geelong game in there, Freo, GWS. So starts to get a bit harder for Connor, and that big break even probably just ruins what his job to come in, make some cash for us and able to pivot to another player. So I'm trying to, as I said last week, with moving on Horn Francis, trying to get rid of a couple of these round 12 guys just to balance my team a little bit better. Annoying about Lindsay, but what can we do? In a perfect world, I'll hold. It's all about where Nevitt is. So that will be my decisions with my side. If Nevitt is named and named on the, if he's named as a sub or named on the field. Gorn, did he scored the same as Cherry last week, so at least that was slight relief. Deconning, nothing's changed there, but the forward line is where I'm trying to make the most. So my overall thought going forward, because we do have a situation where we are obviously off the bye rounds from next week, is I want five. I only want one rookie. I shouldn't say five primos because couple of these guys might necessarily be primos, but I want one rookie player playing on my forward line and one rookie in my defense. So short in my flex. So the idea is he comes and moves for Liam O'Connell, and then Short goes back, but I'm trying to upgrade Short at the same time. And then my forward line at the moment, obviously Rankin, McRae, Daniel. I'm looking at getting 2 out of the players that we've got who are looking as the most trading options this week. Is so your Bailey Smith, your Humphrey, or your Marriage, and then set them up in my forward line, and then only have Davidson there as my F6. So that's kind of how I want to set up, and then have the 4 rookies on field with the 4 guys in the midfield. Sarong, Neil as the more expensive captain options, Chera and Oliver. And we'll watch Oliver for at least another week because it's not like he's losing cash or anything, but he was quite poor. So he can kind of stay, and then, have the sort of rookies rotating. The bench is a little bit sad at the moment, but a couple of these trades will start fixing that situation. But if I can have the big dogs in the defense, so I have been playing around with the idea that either Whitfield or Jordan Clark comes in, and be it this week or next week. So one of the ideas that I had playing around with my side today was not necessarily Liam O'Connell. Liam O'Connell goes next week. It would be Shay Short. Rosie was the other one I was looking at doing. So trading both those guys, and then moving on one of these poor performing rookies, be it, say, it could be a Hewitt or a Stone or any of them. So let's just call it Hewitt because it doesn't really matter at the moment. And it'll all depend on who sort of is available. Go out and get the young Port Adelaide player in Moraes. Now, there's a few other players I can talk about, and I will be talking about in this podcast anyway. But if I go, so just so you guys have a kind of an idea of what I'm looking at. So Moraes comes into my team, and then I can look at going, say, maybe it's a Bailey Smith, but like I'm open to all these 3 guys at the moment. So if we have a look at that and we go, say, Bailey Smith, and then let's just do Humphrey for now, as he's slightly the more expensive guy. So we'll put Humphrey into my side. There he is, Bailey Humphrey at 270k. You'll see there that I'll have 368k left. My situation there would be still the 4 guys, but it doesn't really matter because it is best 18 this week. Sarong, Neil, as I said, it gets a little bit weaker because Rosie isn't there, but with best 18, say Nevitt comes on field, and we can go through that. Gorn to Conning, and then the forward line is a situation which Rankin, McRae, Daniel, Bailey, Smith, and Humphrey with Davidson. And then next week, Powell Pepper, after he gets another price rise, he makes way, and Locke, Liam O'Connell makes way to get either Jordan Clark or Whitfield, and that's how I get my 5 in the forward line and 5 in defence. And I think that's a fairly strong situation to kind of have coming in. The only thing that's probably disappointing is maybe not start having Neil, and if I'd gone down to, say, a Callahan, I might have been able to squeeze out one more sort of mid-pricer in there, but it does give me a few options going into next week. So that is a little bit of the thought going through my head. Potentially I could, maybe it's just fade a Smith completely and go get Clark or Whitfield this week. But I'm thinking, just because they're also their break evens compared to the forwards, if I don't go one of those forwards this week, I completely miss out. So that's what's happening from my side. And then from a vice captain point of view, I personally think it's Neil. My worry a little bit with Zorko is he's been going so well because the Lions have been so close in games. I don't think that's the situation at all this week. I'd be shocked if my boys, like they did well to halftime last week, but I think Brisbane should be too strong, run over us, probably even from the start. So this is a game where Zorko could potentially get rested early. Yeah, it all depends. The Lions could pick up an early injury and it just completely changes that completely. So I kind of prefer to go with Neil. And then the backup comes on Sunday. And I'm still debating over the 2 Saints players. I know that obviously they're playing Port, but at the same time, I think McRae, even up against that midfield, is not a bad backup option. He's just flying so much at the moment. I don't think it makes a real difference to him. Port aren't going to really put attention to McRae. If anything, they're more likely to put into these damaging halfbacks that St Kilda have. Sinclair just ran around and did whatever he pleased last week, and Wanganeen Malira pretty well the same. So there's no way Port Adelaide can let those guys run around and do that. Where I think McRae, it's always harder to take those in and under players. And, you have to look at, say, how Libba's travelling. Rowley's obviously added a lot more explosion to himself, but, these mids, they just come on and do whatever they want. So I think that's a fairly safe backup to have. So that is my team in a nutshell. And we'll get on to talking more about you guys and talking about, as I'm going through this, I'll bring up some of these price projections and we can talk about how that's going to affect, because those, even with Supercoach Gold, it's kind of some of these projections for rookies aren't completely right. Even say a Bailey Humphrey, and a great example. If I put Bailey Humphrey, let's just start off with Bailey Humphrey because this is probably the obvious one. So minus 55, break even. So according to Supercoach, will go up this week by 55K, but it's sort of based a little bit of false economy, some of these stats, because you look at sort of what he's done previously. Against Richmond, he had that -3 where he was subbed off pretty early after giving away free kick. Hasn't obviously set the world alight against North Melbourne before, so it is a bit of a kind of a different situation where he's playing that Dusty Martin role, more starting forward and then swapping around with Flanders, and Tukes more covering Rowley and Anderson. So, obviously he's getting more points in the middle there. So if we kind of have a look at what he's projected, 72 is not the worst projection for him against Adelaide, but say North Melbourne at 55 and Richmond 49, you'd expect him to go way better than that. So even if I think conservatively, I'd say it's 75 against the Crows, but I think if we go North Melbourne, where it's probably the bigger one, even if we went like sort of kind of, I think, worst case scenario against these two teams, which would be North and Richmond, and say it's 80, I think that gives us just a little bit of a better idea of what he does the next 3 weeks. So all of a sudden you can see the 55K this week, but now that jumps up to 31K and 10K. And over that time, it's 96,000 over those 3 weeks before. And that's, let's just say it's a really bad situation against the Swans. He still makes over 4 weeks 100K. If it's a much better situation, and let's just say he gets off the chain, goes to 90, and can still let's see what he's done against West Coast and Melbourne. So let's just say against West Coast, he had 104. So we'll be a bit more conservative for North, 100, and then Richmond, who are probably the worst side in the league right now. So a 110's not completely out of the charts, because he has obviously done it this year already against Melbourne. Marvel, the Tigers don't usually play well there either. So we kind of project that, and now you can kind of see his projection there massively jumps up, where it's a situation by the time he gets to Sydney, even a poor score against Sydney, he's gone up 150K, and that's what we're kind of looking at from our rookie point of view. So for those kind of asking already, and I know there'll be a lot of questions about Humphrey, it's a definitely somebody you need to consider. How does that compare to marriage? And that's probably the big one. So we'll cover those two. So the rumor is McGovern is going to miss 2 to 4 weeks. So how that kind of sets up in regards to how his kick-ins, and then does he have to play a little bit more tall? I think they bring in support around him so he can continue to play his role. And again, these projections are really hard because he hasn't got a career history here, and he's been playing a different role. So they've got him projected sort of 50, 65, 62. Giants obviously a harder game, but at the same time, if he's in defence, he should get some good scores. Then we've got the Carlton and the Bombers. Now, you only have to have a look, obviously, what he did this week against a good Freo side. It was a 123, and then even the Lions the week before, the 72. So he has gone up 42K, which was frustrating because he was a guy I was looking at in pre-season. But even if he can kind of come out and get an 80 against the Giants, so let's just go say 80 the next 3 weeks, which I think is a fairly conservative projection. You can obviously see there the projections come up. It's 50K this week. 49, but let's round it up. 50, then 40 to the Blues, and then another 12 against the Bombers. And within 3 weeks, he's made that 102K, which makes him a fairly solid choice. Even if we keep that Giants projection, but let's just say he does fairly well against, say, Carlton and Essendon, or we could do it the other way around, but just to kind of give you an idea. And all of a sudden there, he starts becoming like a 400K player for us and goes up that 140. If it's sort of the other way and he can replicate what he did against Freo and say it's a 120 because let's just say the ball spends a bit more time down there and it doesn't as much in the other week. So let's just go say that 80 against Carlton, and maybe it's an 80 against the Bombers. And I think against Hawthorn, we probably should bump that up just a little bit. I think 46 is a little bit low. What did he go against the Lions? 70. So even we go 60. So we project there. And all of a sudden, we're up to that 406. So it's nearly in that range of 150K still. If he can, get a sort of a big match like that, he just needs that one big score in that time. Even if we go, let's go 80 and see if we go, say, 120 against Carlton, what does that do for him? So it continues to make it go a little bit further, and he still gets to 406, which is, that's 141. It's close enough to 150K. And then after that sort of zone, they do start playing like they've got teams like Melbourne and Richmond, St Kilda, who we know defenders absolutely feast on. So he is very tempting. So when McGovern kind of comes back for more, it's probably going to be Essendon, maybe, because it's probably a game that they can, so they'll be trying to get him up for there. If not, maybe they focus on the Melbourne Richmond period as well. So I guess it just depends on how he's recovering. So he still scores all right with McGovern in there, but if McGovern's not there at all and he's got monopoly on kick-ins, some of these scores could be 3 figures. And yeah, if we get a situation where, let's just go, it's 3 straight hundreds, all of a sudden we're talking about a guy here who can absolutely be a key to unlock our players in our team as we sort of hit that buy situation. So the hundreds there gets him to, say, close to 420. Yeah, makes that 150K. So hopefully those sort of ideas give you a bit of an idea. And Tolan, very interesting. There's go. Hope marriage goes 40. As much as yeah, I can see why some people would probably wish for that. I just can't see that happening in a situation where the Giants are just going to dominate. And he's a guy who's just going to take absolute bulk kick-ins this week. The moment McGovern's not there, and he was already splitting kick-ins anyway. Like the preseason, that's where I was keen on him. It's just unfortunate that first game was sub, because it was a guy that I was kind of looking at as a potential starter. Anyone who's listed as a forward who's playing defense is gold for our teams. And it's just kind of disappointing that's the way it worked out for us. So kicking so far 4 West Coast each week. So you had the round 1 where Marriage did start as the sub. And this is where it kind of gets even more interesting, because here's a guy who was the sub and he still took 3 kick-ins that game. So it was McGovern, Dewar, Baker, and Marriage. So that was 4 to Dewar and then 3 to Baker and Marriage. So it was kind of split. And then the second week, it was all Marriage and McGovern. So 5 and 4. Unfortunately, Marriage didn't play on for one of them. So his score could have been slightly higher. And then the following week, we fast forwarded to this Freo game. So you had Tom Cole, Duggan, and McGovern all take 2, 1 to Baker. But then 9 out of 9 was for Marriage. Which is obviously a huge, because 9 times playing on, that's just 9 easy kicks. Did help the fact that Freo did kick 16 behinds, so you're probably not going to get that situation every week. But in saying that, the fact that he already had that monopoly on kick-ins, and now McGovern's not going to be there, you could see a situation like the previous week where Marriage and McGovern took 10. Maybe it's a case that even if it was, say, 10 behinds, maybe Marriage takes 7 or 8 of them. And that's already, getting himself involved in the game. And if he gets any 1-2s, he's going to smash that, 40 points that you were just talking about, mate. So it does make it sort of hard on that point. So there's 2 projections we'll talk about. You guys have got some great questions coming through, so I'll look at some of these other projections for you for other players, because I think that's probably the best way to kind of talk about sort of who we're looking at. But yeah, the Marriage versus Humphrey and even Bailey Smith discussion's a real good, interesting one, and I'll do a bit of Bailey Smith in a minute as well. All right, Corey, do I go Hasty out over Campo, 600 short of going to Bryce? So is that the case of if you Hasty, can you get Bryce, mate? And you've actually put one of these as trading pattern to Bryce, Smith for Hasty, and Horn Francis for Marrick. My only issue of trading Horn Francis now is you're kind of a week late on that. I'm really glad Chris and I obviously jumped on that early last week. I think it's the right move, as I did say on the pod the other day with Benny and who else we had, God and Pro. The fact that Horn Francis could have easily scored 120 in that game if things went right for him. Unfortunately, they didn't, and that was kind of the situation. So against the Saints, you'd expect him to continue to bounce back, and wouldn't surprise me at all. Comes out and gets sort of at 110, 120. The fact that I turned him into Sinclair, I'm backing at least this week Sinclair goes similar, if not better than him. But even if it's not, if it's close enough, because I'm already 80 points up, and I wanted the points to catch up on people. So, and obviously the cash that's gone the other way. So Sinclair this week, he went up 22,000 and Horn Francis dropped 30K. So that, or 30, might have been 34 or something. So I'm already 56K to the good for that. people are going to struggle to get Sinclair now anyway, and you've already missed that sort of big score, and he's got a break even of 58. So if you don't nearly get him now, you're not getting him, because if he does put one more good score up, and he did score a 143 against Port Adelaide last year, so we kind of actually have a look at that with these with my projections, and as always, thanks to Nath for setting this up. But if Sinclair goes anywhere near like he did last year against Port Adelaide, where he did score that 143, just to kind of give you, and you look at some of those other scores of 113 or 109, they've got him projected 126. So bounces up by potentially another 30k if it was as high as that 143 as he got last year. It could be a 650. And Horn Francis, on the other hand, he's going to drop some coin unless he has obviously an out of this world game. And then you've got this situation where, I'm probably 100k to the good there. Not that I'm planning to trade out Sinclair, but it's still going to be able to pick up Horn Francis if I need to cheaper. And the fact that, I'm not paying high price that some people are starting to get Sinclair, but it's missing those points as well. But in regards to Horn Francis, if I kind of do look at him, and I think he's a worthy one, I'll just trade Rankin here. Not that I'd ever want to do that. But let's go to Jason Horn Francis, and we'll have a little look at what's happening for him. Actually, I can probably do it by pick teams, because he'll be still one of the highest owned players. Interesting that Caleb Daniels owned by 77%. That kind of gives you an idea of how many true teams we have in Supercoach. But here's Horn Francis now. So he's still got the break even of 151, which Supercoach says he's no chance of getting to. It's interesting. Highest score up there against St Kilda is a 118. So maybe we use that as our starting point as his projections. And if he goes sort of a 118, what does that mean for your sides? And of course, it's not going to let me do that. There we go, 118 projection. So if he was able to match what he did last year, he only drops to 13k this week, or nearly 14k, which is not the end of the world. The problem is, what if he comes up and only sort of scores a 90? So it's not, and this is where it gets hard if you've kept him, because it's 25k. It's not like a huge drop. And even if he has a kind of, say, even if it's a really bad game against Hawthorn for his standards, let's say it's a 70, it's 40k over 2 weeks. So you're really doing the trade now to get that, him 40k cheaper. It's more the points is more the thing is the points factor. But then at the same time, games at Adelaide Oval, he usually does play better at, and you kind of think he's going to probably bounce back at some point. So it does become a little bit more risky if that's the way you want to go. So just a little bit of food for thought in regards to moving Horn Francis, especially the fact that you are technically kind of going down. Like Smith isn't guaranteed that. Like he looked good. He found the ball, tackled hard, huge time on ground. Tick, 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 tick for Bailey Smith. And if he didn't butcher the ball, that score could have been anything. So he's definitely got all the tools there. So I don't mind. I can see what you're trying to do with the Horn Francis as trading pattern to buy Smith for Hasty. And I think the other way around, isn't it? Hasty to Smith. So I get the idea of bringing in Bailey Smith for sure. The only problem is, as time goes on, do they manage him? And that's just a worry in the back of my mind. But his break even's really good, and I'll get up his sort of projections at the moment. So I don't mind the move. I get the move. But you are trading out a guy that potentially was a premium. But the fact that you are splitting them for Smith and Marriage, and both of them should make at least money. So in case they do fail at some point, it's really good. Josh, how did I score that and go up in the ranks? That's actually my NRL. So I started off with my NRL because so my Supercoach AFL was 2,000, but my NRL was 1164. So I'm currently 200 or 207 in NRL. So I'm actually flying in that. AFL, I'm currently 9,000, but it is very early. Yeah, you've realised that one. Hey, Simon, afternoon or evening, depending on what part of Australia or the world that you're in. Yeah, good. So, 2,000, mate. So it wasn't too bad. It could have been better, but it actually, nothing that my side, as I said in the opening, it was more the, what sort of a couple of those rookies did late, which was a bit frustrating. So the Carlton Collingwood news is Camperelli is not in, which is again frustrating, and he's not even named as emergency, which is even worse. So the Pies, it's Frampton and Myercheck for McGuinness, sad news about McGuinness and Mason Cox obviously been dropped. But for Carlton, it's where it is Moyer, Cooper Lord, and Will White. I'll call him Willie White. And Cottrell's the one actually out injured. It's funny, I was making a bit of a comment about that today, saying watch Cottrell get dropped for some spud or whatever, but he's actually injured. Boyd has been omitted, and Francis Evans. So that's what I was saying. I was saying to the boys, so watch Cottrell stay in for Francis Evans stay in for Cottrell, which annoyed a couple of my Carlton mates. So potentially some guys there that we'll get to have a bit of a look at going forward. Willie White, you expect probably to be the sub, but Moyer is the one that we're more interested in from a Carlton point of view to sort of see how he goes. Their emergencies, Binns, Boyd, and Evans, so no help there. Ned Long will probably be the sub again. Ed Allen's on the emergency list. Pretty stock standard. The big one, because I know a few people are looking at vice captain and captain options. I think Darcy Cameron versus Conning will be a very interesting matchup. He's definitely no slouch in the ruck, Darcy Cameron. And if you kind of have a look, the rucks haven't been having their way with him. Sweet got a 90. Like, okay, Sweet's not the biggest world beater. I know obviously Cameron didn't do so much there, but as a kind of defensive ruck, he's not too bad. The first week, the Giants, that was kind of a different situation because Briggsy did go off injured, so we didn't probably get the full look at that. But Tim English in round 3, it's a 113. It was solid. He had, and English in that game had 33 hitouts, was just kind of not like him. But Cameron, probably matched him a bit too. So wouldn't be surprised if Cameron sort of matches or beats DeConning in the ruck. And, just about, I feel like Cameron will try to hurt DeConning the other way, maybe try to get forward, also help out in defense, which, just try to make DeConning be a little bit more accountable. DeConning's form has been brilliant, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if DeConning does actually come out and do fairly well, but he's not a bad VC option. The one that a few people were messaging me about was Nick Dacos. We know Dacos is an absolute star, but Hewitt will go straight to him. Hewitt goes to him every time. Would not be surprised if Perryman goes straight to Cripps, and we might have a bit of an issue this week where we've got tag, and it's probably Shearer and Cripps kind of being the more trying to attacking guys, and when DeCoey and Walsh and those guys get thrown through there. So I think there'll be a little bit of lockdown happening in that Carlton Collingwood game, especially around the stoppages. Just a little bit of thought there. But Campo, I think he should get more games. Like if we have a look at his situation here, if we get it up, I think it's an easy hold, unless that's like the only person that you've got to trade out, because look, that's a break even of -41. Now the worry is you hold that long and he comes back as sub, and that kind of becomes frustrating. But he's 2 games so far, he's gone 56 and 52, so they've got the projections of 34. But unless he's sub, I think 50 is a fair call, and there's a big chance against West Coast he gets a reprieve, because the hard thing is like they do need to obviously win games, and that's a chance to win, and they probably want the best team. But I don't think he did a huge amount wrong, that he shouldn't get another opportunity. I guess it all comes down to how he goes in the reserves this week. But like 350s in a row, and you're talking about a guy there, it's 38, 26, 18, so gets him up to say 200k. Like right now, if you're trading him, you're getting nothing for him. So I think if he can come in, and even if it's not a great score, even if it's spiking and it's only at 50, which he's shown that he's got the skills to at least get there. He's a guy who could make still 80k for us, and get close enough to that 100k where we want. It's probably the bare minimum from a rookie. Realistically, we want kind of 150, but cash could be important this year. And I think there's probably worse players that you can trade out. Like, I know they're playing this week compared to not playing, but like you look at sort of Hewitt's already in that situation where it's a break even of 8. It's up against the Giants. If he, for example, was looking like to be named sub, the hard thing there is just when they're playing, which is the Sunday game. But some people were looking at trading out, say, Hasty instead, or even like a Powell Pepper type or whatever. So if it looks like Hewitt's the sub again, or even dropped, maybe he's a more relevant one, just because of obviously his score of 22 now is stuck in there for a while. So even if he kind of rebounds, and he wasn't scoring that great anyway, but around that Camperoli scores he was. So if you kind of put in those 50s, And we can just kind of see. So if we get 4 weeks of 50 there from Hewitt, you'll see it's probably a little bit slower than what the Camporelli one was, because that 22 is going to drop out. So he eventually gets up there to that sort of 200 mark and makes another, 60K. But that's if he doesn't get sub affected again. So it just doesn't look like he's got that spike game at the moment. He's going all right, but the fact that he's played pretty good minutes in those first couple of games and he's just not finding the ball does have some concern. So, and Stone's the other one, depending on what happens with the Giants in. So if he survives as some of these Giants players come back, awesome. But if he doesn't, maybe that's a slightly even one, because he has obviously already made the 35,000 Ks. But there are a couple options there to look at if you're not wanting to trade Camper. You could potentially trade Lindsay, but he might be only a 1 weeker now too. So I'd probably prefer to sort of hold him. Yes, the break even's 28. But I'm backing him just because he's got that better scoring, 86 and 78 before. He probably doesn't play against Geelong, but let's just use it. Let's just say for whatever reason he did, and we'll say a 69. Let's just say it's a 60, and then he starts sort of coming back and scoring sort of better scores that we know he can get. Let's just go an 80 against the Bombers and even a 70 odd against Freo. Once that sort of score drops out, he starts making bulk cash again. So it'd be a slow burn, and then he starts making some money. And even those projections, which are pretty low for a Lindsay, 49, all of a sudden you see he's already making that 80K. And if it's any higher, like he's already done, which was say an 86, and let's just say he gets that 85 against the Tigers. You can see there again his projections. We're talking about a guy who's now heading up towards that 300 mark and possibly more. So the fact that it's probably a 1 week miss, if that's the only player you've got to trade out, fine. But again, I'd be trying to hold where possible. So I hope that kind of answers that. Josh, you keep Sheasel. Yes, I did. Main reason was, it's not an issue of him not finding the ball. Again, it's kind of like they had him versus Rankin, but not on each other. So Rankin was coming up from half forward, really no attention, just hanging around the stoppages, and being that link-up guy. North Melbourne trying to do the same thing with Sheasel. It was just that Adelaide are just so much better at it, and Rankin's more talented at doing that role. It's what obviously Adelaide got him for, to play that role. Where for Sheasel, that is not how he did play a little bit more like an under 18s where he did go forward, but that sort of link up guy has probably never been his kind of role. I feel like he's one that would probably be more that Petrarca type, go rest up forward and then go play midfield. So it might be something, a part of it, which is his development. Part of it also might be now North Melbourne go, well, where is he best set? Like, do we actually need him like just full on straight guts? Or do we need to put him back half back, get a little bit more confidence going into him? Caleb Daniels obviously is finding the ball at will, but he butchered the ball something chronic. I think he gave away 3 goals last week at half back. So not to say Daniel won't lose his role there in back pocket, but maybe they need a Sheasel to come out and kick that ball out of half back. They might look better. So I'm willing to hold. And I think now that I've missed the chance to trade him out, he's still going to move bulk cash, and he's another one it's worth looking at in the projections, because he's not traveling so well. But the one thing with these guys, if you don't trade him, their value means nothing, because he might go. It only means something if he gets injured, but if he keeps going, I'd back him at some point to rebound. Now the hard thing is he's already lost the 44K. So if I was going to do it, last week was the week. He could potentially have a really bad game against the Swans this week. It would not surprise me. So let's just go worst case scenario there. And then let's say he starts to rebound back to his kind of better self. So we'll go 110s after that, because that's what we're probably used to sort of Harry Sheasel doing against some of these teams. And then the draw does kind of open up a little bit, around that bye. They do have Richmond and West Coast coming up soon. The Bombers at Marvel. I think the games under the Marvel will probably suit him better. So I think there's a couple of tough ones. He's got a pretty awesome record against the Blues of recent. So maybe I've been a bit generous to Carlton. I put him at 110, but if he gets, say, a 70 this week and even gets attention or whatever, he could drop down to 544. Great for the people who don't own him, because you're going to pick him up kind of cheap. And he might bottom out at that sort of 517, 510, 5.5 mark, even 500. But if he starts to get find it and starts getting a roll on, it only takes one massive game. So let's just say the Carlton who, he's got a history of scoring quite well, not 235. Let's go 125. It'd be pretty amazing if he came out and scored that. And let's just say against Richmond, he probably, gets it together and towers us up. And all of a sudden, like that price will start going up. But realistically, I don't really care about the price. I care about his scoring, which he'll get together at some point. And he is like, it won't take a lot. Yes, I've unfortunately had those scores, but so is most of the community. It's what he sort of does now. So for say Chris, for example, who traded him out last week to Bailey Dell, he scored an 89. Bailey Dell he already had, but that's the one I'm versing him with. So Chris brought in Zorko, so he matches him with me there, but now it's Bailey Dell versus Sheasel. So they went pretty well the same last week. So Bailey Dell, scores like 100 and Sheasel only scores a 70 this week. I'm down 30 points. But then, I'll back Sheasel to outscore Bailey Dell through this period and probably for the rest of the season. I think it'll be close, but I think the guy's too talented not to sort of turn it around. And you're always going to have little down parts in your career too. So it's not the worst because, yes, you could probably trade him out and maybe pick him up 80 or 90K cheaper. But yeah, again, I thought probably the move was last week, a little bit like the Horn Francis discussion. So that's what I did there. Thoughts on George Hewitt over Chera? Hewitt is flying. The only issue is this will be definitely locked down this week. He's good enough to find the ball, but he goes to Dacos every time. And Dacos, you only have to have a look at Dacos' scores against Collingwood. I've been pretty big about talking about this for a while. So, sorry, Sarong, we'll just trade you for a minute to look at Nick. And he's actually pretty highly owned, I think. Still, I think he's in about 30-odd% of teams. There he is, 29% to be Pacific there. 134. So he's break even, which he's very easy to get. And we've seen this in the past. He did that 150 against Carlton. Now, he went 101 and 100. This game, he was on track for a score between 100 and 110. And he went absolutely crazy in the last sort of 20 minutes. I think he kicked a really big goal. By memory, and had some other late score involvements, and the game was on the line, so he got maximum points. So he was actually tracking for another 100 score, but that's kind of him. He's pretty standard against Carlton, and then it's the next one against the Swans, which is now the JJ game, which we know JJ is going to go straight to Dacos and follow him around all day like a bad smell. So though he did get the 125 last week, I expect that projection 113. I think that's pretty spot on. I wouldn't surprise. It got probably slightly lower. Maybe I feel like maybe it's 105 this week against Sydney. If he's going to score a low score, it's going to be that. What is his lowest score this year so far? The 66. So let's give him some credit and say he plays well and gets up to an 80. So you got kind of that situation where he probably plateaus out to around that 557 mark. Obviously anything lower, if it's a 70, we want to get as close to 550 as possible, which that was exactly how it'd go. And then rebound against, say, the Brisbane, which won't be easy to rebound, but he is just that good. I'd be trying to get him around that mark if you don't have him. And again, I don't think he's the vice captain option this week, just because the way Hewitt's going to get into him. So a little bit of a thought there about Nick Dacos and a little bit of thought of Hewitt. So as I said, I really like Hewitt. He's a great price, but now it's not the week for it. And there's a guy in a midfield who's way better option this week. But I appreciate that question. It's a good one. You must be getting sore from carrying Ben and Chris this preseason. Yeah, well, we're into the season now. I'm still kind of carried. Chris is flying. It's just a bit ill this week, and he's as always, betting me just in Supercoach, but I think I outscored him by maybe 100 points this week. I told him it's going to turn. He got his little fast start, but it's not going well for him. Oh, excuse me. And what do we got here? Fabs Park, Swizzle, talk to me about Ethan Reid. Why is no one talking about him? Why? Because he's a key forward, mate, who's playing he's just come off a couple of easier games. Now, the Suns do have a couple more easier games coming up, but Adelaide will be a bit tougher. Just trying to get up his stats versus the North game. So, I mean, the Melbourne game, I was there. Yeah, they do have the three-pronged attack. It does look quite good, but what did he score on the weekend? 47. So, you're going to get this from forwards who play backup ruck, and it's just absolutely killed his scoring. So, if I can get him up just to show you like what that looks like. What do I need to do? I need to get up here, Ethan Reid, but I don't think he's the at 169. It does have the break even of minus 47, and you kind of see that and you go, wow, yeah, that's pretty good. But if it's another poor score this week, he makes some coin and then he just absolutely plateaus. Like, he would have to go massive against the Crows, which I just don't see it happening. This is literally, he'd have to go 100 the next 3 weeks to really be like massively relevant. And if he did that, like, okay, it's absolutely through the roof, and all of a sudden you got a guy who's made 160K and you look good. But the reality is, it is a key forward playing a ruck role. And, I think that the 100 against West Coast, is against West Coast. So there's a reason why against that. And Melbourne's not much chop, and he's got 100. So if it sort of gets to a more realistic for it, 60, maybe a 65, and then maybe the 100 against Richmond, makes some coin, starts to drop off a little, makes some coin. Yeah, he probably could get 100K and then kind of plateaus off there. But what happens if he comes up and does what he did against Melbourne and just puts that 45, and then all of a sudden you got this situation where, it's made K, dropped off, a little bit of K. I just don't like it. I think because at any point he could put another stinker in, and like, the money's there. It probably does make this money the same if he can find that extra 100 somewhere. But there's a lot of risk. I think it's a lot of risk picking a young key forward because, if that 100 doesn't happen against Richmond, and let's just say it's a 60, it becomes kind of a disastrous pick. It's like, what's that, 38, 50K, 60, 70K, and then you're kind of stuck with this guy who's at 250K. What do you kind of do with him then? So it's not awful. I just think there's other players. Like, if we think we've got Moraes this week, there's also Closeley that no one's talking about from Geelong, who was obviously sub-affected that first game and came on and played really well. So there is some other options there. I just don't like it for that price. Okay, sweet. Thanks, Carl. How's the serenity with that rank? The NRL one, definitely the AFL one. It'll get there eventually. You'd be wrapped with Nevitt Humphrey, worth using a boost for. You'd be wrapped in Nevitt Humphrey, worth using a boost for, or is it Humphrey or Mirage? I don't think it's a Mirage, because at least he's playing that sort of equal fourth, or even really for them, it's an equal third guy, because it's Rao Anderson and then it's Flanders, Nevitt, Miller kind of splitting up their time in the midfield. So, they really like him. He's got a great size. Really liked his game on the weekend. I think the Suns are playing with this real confidence and arrogance now. They kind of know Dimmer's game plan. He's still young. He's only 20, so there will be down moments for him. But what's he like, 186, 187 centimeters? It's it's a good size about him for a guy that can sort of bounce between both. And I think it's the perfect setup, the fact that they can swap him and Flanders together. And you kind of look at their stat line from the weekend, and it was the exact same. Humphrey, 23 and kicked a goal. Flanders had 25 and kicked a goal. Humphrey went the 111, where Flanders did go the 71. And the reason for that was obviously Flanders, butchered the ball a bit more than Humphrey. So is he going to go 111 each week? No. Could he come and regress to maybe it's sort of 70s or 80s? Yes. Is that enough? As I went through before, as long as it's sort of 80s over the next 3 weeks, it's enough to do the cash. And I do like that more than the last question about Reid, because like Reid, there's a lot more risk on getting that score, and then a lot has to get right for him to get up to 300. It's sort of, I feel like he gets at best 250, where at least Humphrey, I feel like he's probably getting to, like, I don't see a world where he's not getting to at least 370, 380. And if he gets to sort of 400, it becomes a real stepping stone to one of those guys that's dropped out. There is actually a world there if you move Humphrey into your flex, and you could actually and let's just say he has one bad game or a couple bad games and he looks like he's dropping cash, he could be side swapped to a Stewart. Imagine just able turning Humphrey straight into a Stewart kind of and that becomes your D5 or your D6. So I do get the risk. They do play well at home. Adelaide's the big test, and I would have rather seen them against Adelaide last week or then playing Melbourne this week. But that's obviously we can't do much about that. And the Richmond game does look like it's could be a good one. I did talk about this last week. So the Suns draw, they're they've just had the on the road, the bye, and then on the road again. It's an absolute horrific start for the Suns. We talk about AFL and their favourites, and you think if anybody, they would look after their boys, the Gold Coast Suns. Not this year. So they play West Coast in Perth, then they buy Melbourne away. They get to go home for the first time this year against Adelaide. Now, obviously, their first game was meant to be against the Bombers. Can't help that, but whatever, the way it's worked out. So the Crows, then they go over to Adelaide and play North Melbourne, the Barossa, and then play Richmond straight off. So I would be interested if they go home or if they go just straight to Melbourne for the week and they play the Tigers at Marvel. So I wouldn't be surprised there if there is a little bit of swapping some stuff around for the Suns just to manage, because after that they have a massive game at home against the Swans. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if sort of maybe against North Melbourne you've got your Rao and Andersons playing more bulk, but against Richmond and even Tupa against Richmond, say it's Flanders, Humphrey, get real big opportunity. And I feel like that could be a real spike game, Flanders, Humphrey, maybe a third option in there, just because, you can't take any game lightly, but, that's the game you'd expect. They would definitely expect to win and then try to freshen up a couple of those good players, because then they play Sydney and the Lions back-to-back. And then they go to Darwin for back-to-back games as well before then be coming back down to Melbourne. So they're all over the shop. So I think there will be a little bit of playing around the management, but some of these younger guys, obviously because they're young, fresh and hungry, they'll be thrown there. And at least their midfielders are still young. Even Tuke's not that old. But I can see them sort of playing around with those sort of CBAs, and I can see definitely a boost coming in that sort of section with the Richmond North game. So I think there's a real chance. And that's why I'm not against the Humphrey marriage, both the combination either, because just the way it's worked out with McGovern. So, there's enough there. And any player on any given week can put in a really poor score, but I think the Suns are showing enough that they can be the real deal this year. It's not like they've limped over the line against two poor teams. And the fact that they've actually done it away, which was always their biggest negative, I think there's a lot to like there. So Adelaide's going to be a challenge, but it's not like Adelaide haven't had their challenges as well, especially on the road. So, that's a shame that's not like the Friday or the Saturday night game, as weird as it would sound, the Gold Coast versus Adelaide, because it's probably the game of the round this week. Because it's probably one of the most interest. I don't kind of looking through that fixture. What else am I really pumped about? Like Carlton Collingwood is always fine Thursday night. Geelong should towel Melbourne. Brisbane will do an absolute number on us. North Sydney, meh. GWS West Coast, meh. Port Adelaide, St Kilda, probably some interest there. And then Freo Doggies is probably the other one, which I'm actually probably looking forward to. So, it's just a shame Gold Coast Adelaide just 120. I'd nearly rather swap that around as the Friday night game and watch that, because it's just so much more appealing. Good. And I love when you guys answer each other's questions in here as well. Thanks for that, Tay. I'll just get that right. Tantrum. All right. I think that's L's 2 for 1. Hey, Swizz, hope you are well. Would you trade Fraser, Foss, and Campo from Moraes, Bice, and Sinclair? I don't love the thought of trading Fraser and Campo before making any money. And this is the problem, because you haven't really made any money. You probably made a little bit of Fraser, but not a huge amount. But I do get the idea that, Sinclair, the hard thing with Sinclair, last week was the week to get him. And this is sort of these break evens. I just kind of want to mention. So, yes, his break even's still low enough. So if you don't get him this week, you're not getting him at all. So if you really want him, that's fine. The defenders, and I was chatting about this with a few people today. So the primo, and actually I might just get this up. So while I'm talking about this, in regards to the primo defenders, so we've got obviously Zorko and there, but let's actually sort this by average. So Zorko, Currently 18%, which is actually really low. I should actually probably sort this by top 1% because that's probably a better indication, because that's, the top 1,700 people, and that's what we're all trying to get up into that spot. So let's rank these by top 1%, and let's actually look by their average. I know I can't look at the averages now, but let's look at premium guys, because I think that's a better indication for us about what's happening. And guys we should be targeting. So here we go. So we've got Sheasel, who's 70% owned. So it's not really a hurt factor there, because as I said earlier, Caleb Daniels 77% of the thing. But you've got a situation where this guy is the most owned defender still. So yeah, maybe if you jump off, and you might get a little slight leg up, but it's like, who are you going to? Who's actually really dominating? So you've got you got Sheasel, Zorko, who's 67%. So he's the one that's really hurting, because he's absolutely smoking it at the moment. Now 620 makes it hard. Max Holmes, surprisingly, 36%. So people got that value, and he's obviously traveling really well so far. So maybe you want to look at the one I really like here, and I'm actually surprised how much he's owned in the top 1%. So Geordie Clark is one that I'm massively looking at to do that money to get him for next week. Break even of 108 this week, so I don't see him hurting me this week. And he has had poor form against the Dogs in the past. So I can definitely wait a week to look at going that. But it's after that, which is the Geordie Clark draw, which really interests me. So he gets the Tigers, which is over the Barossa, gets the D's, who are obviously traveling really poorly at the moment. The Crows is a massive game. The Saints, who we know just give points to the defenders. Collingwood at home. The Giants will be a tough one away. Port, who was, maybe they've turned it around by then. Suns, that's going to be a tough one. North Melbourne at home, which is good. And then they go Bombers, and then back into St Kilda again. So for a defender's draw, that's outside of probably the Giants, it's probably as good as it gets. So really love that period, and I really want to get on him more than anyone else. So I'm holding off to look at him. The only other one I'm sort of debating between is, because I don't own him, is Whitfield. But I don't find the hurt factor for Whitfield so much, because he's only owned by 10%. So that's maybe where you get the leg up. If, say, a Sheasel or a you're priced out of maybe Sinclair, you could get him. His break even is 116. So again, I could potentially wait, but he has a fairly good record against West Coast. Does play the Saints next week, which is appealing. So his short-term draw is really good. West Coast, St Kilda. But then it gets into this really poor period where Sydney, he could potentially get the Jordan tag. It'll either go to Callahan or him. Geelong away, who could send in a Connor or an Atkins, and it's always hard to play down there. And then, even Freo, it's not the easiest game. So there's some tough ones before it sort of opens up again. Now, in saying that, there's no reason why he couldn't still find the ball, and he has done it in the past. He, he's got some awesome high scores against some of these teams, Freo, especially Carlton, Richmond. But Sydney is one that he has struggled against quite a lot, and Geelong home form versus Geelong away form is a lot different. So it's not that I don't like Whitfield. I think he's a top choice, and he's going to be one of the top 6 for the year as long as he stays fit. But I just like Clark's draw a lot more. Now, Sinclair, I do like, but again, it's like the break even's fine, but you have missed the Richmond game, which does make things hard now. So I picked him because of this situation. Now, in saying that, he could come out and do that against other teams, but this upcoming draw is not the greatest. It's Port away, Giants away. They've got the double game in Adelaide. The 3 Marvels, which is the ones I do like, but they are still up against a couple of tough teams, but he does have really good Marvel form. Carlton at the G, before we sort of get into West Coast and stuff like that. It's so you could pick him if you're going to back, if you can sort of, because I feel like what's going to happen, he'll probably regress against Port and the Giants. But then you probably do want him for that Marvel period. So I don't mind the pick. If you're going to do it, you're going to have to do it now. But there is a world where you could wait and get on Jordan Clark's draw for sure. At least, as I said, with Sinclair, like it is 30%. It's not as bad as some of these other ones missing, but he's still, it is a leg up having him with that top 1%, especially compared to, say, a Whitfield, who's just, is he actually 8th? More people have like Wanganeen Malira, Bailey Dell, those sort of things. Bailey D is actually not that highly owned for the top 1%, only 22%. So, I get what you're trying to do because of the cash situation. But if that's the guy you really want, just go out and do it. because you're not going to get him. Otherwise, look at a couple of those other options. Maybe hold off a week. So hopefully that answers that. Michael, thanks, mate. Swizz, how do I trade in 4 players with 3 trades? I've had somebody ask me, how do I trade in 6 players with 3 trades this week? So no surprise there. So you're trying to get thinking Baz, Marek, Humphrey for Campo, Horn, Francis, and Hastings. Then should I fade Moraes? You could fade Moraes. Thinking if Travaglia plays well, he could be a rookie inclusion. He's quite expensive. The other one people aren't talking about is Hamling, who was quite on last week too, but he's just fallen way down because of the amount of players that we've got available. It's kind of some players just out of sight, out of mind because they weren't playing. So Moraes here. The hard thing is it's a break even of 79. The bad thing for us is if Butters plays, because then that will obviously affect his role. Not the fact that he's inside because he plays more out wing, but does somebody else get pushed out of that midfield and then they throw them on a wing? I hope not, because he's looked really good. Surely they back him in with confidence. Even here with these really low projections of 42, they've got him getting up to 200K, which is, making 80. Only needs one more sort of, even if it's let's just say 3 weeks of 60. Is that completely unrealistic for a young fella? Even playing wing, we always say defensive wing, you get stuck there, you could probably get 50s or 60s. You bounce up. It's better than that Ethan Reed situation. You don't think after his game on the weekend, you probably don't think he's going to be sub for a couple of games because they've got other options. But, one of these has a stinker and then doesn't get it. So there is a little bit of word of warning. If he came out and played really well, and this is the sort of the bit of the FOMO that comes out of it. If he comes out and gets a massive score against St Kilda, all of a sudden you've got this guy that's made 150K in no time, and you might be in a little bit of a trouble. But it's not a must-have because, as we saw against the Tigers, it was only a 52, and it is a rookie. They've got a few changes happening there, so it'd kind of be interesting to see the direction Port go. Surely they've got to back him in, but you've got more confidence in going these other guys that are listed on screen. If it's Humphrey, Marriage, Bailey Smith. So I didn't talk about Bailey Smith's projections, but we probably need to. He is owned by most people, so it's only a few of us content creators that don't have him, a few people that were listening to us. The 94 projection against Melbourne, I think that's completely rough. I think he goes huge this week. So this is the big thing this week. I think he could go easily 120, and all of a sudden it's 50K more expensive. It's just kind of what happens with him after there. I think Adelaide and Hawthorn are such big games that I can see him playing and go fairly well. The Hawks game would be such a big game. I've probably, let's put him down a little bit there. But then what sort of starts happening after that? So, he's a guy that could definitely find himself up to 470K. That's why I kind of am looking at getting him in, because it's only going to take a couple of big games and then he's up there. And then even if he does start getting sub-affected, say it's against Carlton and it's sub-affected for, say, a 60 or whatever situation, and he starts losing cash, well, you can get off that train very quickly, or you just hold and just ride it because he's, scoring so well. Like these games could be even higher than that. We've already seen the fact that he's put up a 147. His, points per minute in that game were insane. So the fact he's back at Geelong, he seemed to like to play those Geelong games, big MCG games, which he probably didn't have the opportunity at the Bulldogs to play. So I think, he'll get up for them. So it's kind of hard to ignore him there. So if that's the situation where you are looking at sort of Baz, Marriage, Humphrey, and fading Moraes, I think that's probably a good idea. Travaglia, and I think there was one other rookie I was looking at. Oh, the young boy from Fremantle who played forward for them, and he's what was his name? It was, so I should know, Dudley. Yeah, that's right. He's Supercoach to DT was off the charts. Because he did obviously have an effect early in that game. But, there's I think he's 99K. So potentially you get an option there. And there could be other guys that kind of come out of nowhere, like these 2 Carlton players that are playing this week. So I think some of that decision, like last week, so Moraes, I held off on Henderson because of the way Moraes played on the Thursday night. If, let's just say, Moya from Carlton comes out and scores really well, all of a sudden, you might have to go, well, Moraes, I can hold, I can go elsewhere, because we might have another rookie that's coming up. So you can't just obviously keep pushing back. But if there's other guys that you're trying to make a decision about, it's an easy one to do there. So we kind of look at the sort of guys that Carlton are bringing in. Now you got White at 99K forward, probably not what we're looking at there. But if we scroll down now, he's not. Moya. It's actually not a bad price. It's 119. So and it all depends. Like if he looks good now, obviously a bit of word of warning because we just saw what happened to Camperelli. But let's just say Moya wasn't the sub and came out and played really well and got a 70 odd. Potentially there becomes a player that you go, oh, hang on, well, they've already got Lord, they've got, and especially if the other players have stunk it up, and you're like, well, Moya's not going anywhere for a while, so we get a free look at him on the Thursday night, and that might help decide like people did for last week. So I hope that includes you there. And as you said, Travalia too. Now he's going to be a little bit of a tougher one because of his expensive price. It's a bit like Langford because no one's talking about Langford this week. I probably should talk about Langford before we get into a couple of these other questions, just in case other people have that. So we'll go Travalia and we'll go Langford, and then I'll move on to more of your questions. But hopefully this answers. So Toby Travalia, awesome, great debut. He's got the size to play AFL. The only problem is can't play Richmond this week. So this is where we get the free look at him because we've seen this plenty before. Rookies can come in sometimes, poor score first up, do a really good score second week, or do the opposite. Great score first up, poor score next week. So those projections, if they're 42s and struggling, he does nothing. And then it's just a massive cross off our list. Where the flip side to that, if he sort of comes out and did what he did last week a couple of times and all of a sudden scores an 80, all of a sudden, he's got that break even of minus 35 and it's only going to take like another sort of 70. And all of a sudden here we got a guy who's, maybe on the verge of making us 50K and then needs one more score and, maybe it's in that 100K scenario again and gets himself up to 270. I don't think he might not be the one just because, again, the way the Saints are traveling and, it was probably a little bit hit up because of the Tigers. Max Hall looked great as well. He's at that more inflated price. But again, not going to be able to play Richmond every week. Well done to those people who do have him because you have made some coin. But we've talked just of what I said about Travalia, 74 into a 33. So 0.2% went out and still got him because he was going to make a little bit of coin. But probably got lucky now because he obviously had that massive score and that 33 could drop out. But if you get a situation where he comes out and scores another 33 this week, all of a sudden his cash making pretty well goes down to 20K. Now you got to kind of wait for that score to drop out. And within 2 or 3 weeks, he could be done unless he spikes another score. So it's always dangerous bringing in these expensive guys. And Langford, we should cover quickly before I get into the next lot of questions because I'm sure there'll be somebody who'll ask about him. I've had a couple of people hit me up saying they're really looking at Langford, thought he played really well. And I thought live, awesome, and definitely deserves more opportunity in that midfield. Just depends on what they do on any given week. And I don't think he's going to be a sub candidate like he was that first week now, but I know he takes a couple poor games and maybe something else happens there. So that sub affected 18. So if it's a poor score, he's not going to go up that much. But if he does, replicate it and get an 80 this week, it's a slow burn. It's a 33. And then what does he go the following week? Because that's when he will have the real jump the following week where, he could make 80K in a couple of weeks. But you are relying on him to go out and score that against a Geelong team in Geelong, which will obviously not be easy to do. And it's only going to, again, take one poor score on that. You're stuck with somebody who's 230, 240K. And you have to have a look at Powell Pepper for that, how he's scoring. So just a little bit of food for thought when we come to that section. So that's kind of why I kind of just, go through these projections just so you guys got a little bit of an idea when you're trading in about the risk. All right, Steely Green to shut down Sorko out of the game. Oh, geez, I wish. I like Steely. I'm a big fan of him. I just don't see it happening. Camden will probably go to Neil, but Camden still every week, he's puts in attention, and the midfield is still going 120 odd. So it's not the answer there. All right, Andy. So we got a SDK, Fino, Sutherland, and Johnson. Yes. SDK again. I'm happy for the hold. Like I get what's happened to him with the scoring, and we did say that there's going to be some up and down. I still don't mind him because it gives you that ruck flexibility. He's going to pick up ruck status, so you can definitely hold and ride it, and wait until he sort of picks up. Um, he's scoring again, which he'll have periods where he will. He could be like we've seen this in the past with players. They kind of flatten out and then they come back. At least, he's going to have the role at different points now. But, the hard thing is there, how long do you kind of carry somebody who's with that 50 in the score, who's going, break even of 95, could probably come out. And if he's not playing much ruck time this week, which is the most likely situation, he probably didn't like the conditions last week, but it could be a 50. The thing is, if Stewart's missing, you could get more of an intercept role. If Stewart's playing, it's a different story. You expect Stewart to be back. So, maybe let's just say if it was a 50, all of a sudden you're dropping 20K. Then if he gets kind of the ruck duties back and can sort of put 3 weeks of, say, 80 together, I think what did he score against his brother last year or something good, wasn't it? Like, went Hawthorn ruck last year, 125. So maybe 80 is being a bit unfair to him. Let's go 100 against Meek and maybe 110 against his brother, because they'll probably let each other go out and just do their own thing. All of a sudden, it's a regression, and then he starts to rebound again and starts getting in the 400s, and you're now moving into the right direction. And kind of ignore them because I haven't put those projections in. So it does depend on who he's up against, and you'd expect Stanley to probably only come in and play this game. For now, maybe. They could potentially do it against Meek, but I'm trying to see where's Cherry and all this. I don't think they play North for ages, round 20. So he's probably the one that they'll want him against. Maybe Witts as well, because he's just that big bully of a ruckman. So you could probably expect Conning to play some good games in there in the ruck. There's going to be poor games. Marshall's still a pretty solid ruck too. So, the fact that he's come out and scored, 74 against Marshall's, no disrespect. It was just probably the conditions hurt him on the weekend. So that's probably the frustrating for owners. But you do get this unique position where you've got a defender ruck. So, it doesn't have to be a trade, but no issue if you want to trade him anyway. But I still like that move. But what you're trying to do anyway is to go for Marek, Bias, and Humphrey. Now, the word of warning there against with Marek and Humphrey, we've seen what SDK, Fraser, up and down, mid-price scores. There needs to be I need a disclaimer on here, the fact that what if Humphrey comes out and scores a 60 or 70, could have a pause game, could get locked down. It happens. Michelini might go to him and do a good job on him, and all of a sudden you're kind of in that situation again. So if you're deciding between it, I do like this move better, which you're saying, or do I need to go up to Sinclair and Whitfield? Now, Whitfield, as I said, you can wait a week, but his draw is right now against West Coast and St Kilda the following week, so it's not a bad time to get him if that's where you want to go. If you want to wait a week and get Clark, I like that. Or Sinclair, this is, as I said, your last chance to get him if you're going to get him. So I think the better move is to try to get the premium in and then maybe go Murray's, because you're going to probably make the same cash Murray's compared to the other guys. It just kind of also depends on what you need. So I kind of am trying to hedge my bets here, because bringing in Smith and Humphrey fixes up my forward line, but it still leaves me enough cash to fix up my back line and get that fifth premium in there. In the midfield, I think the rookies are doing enough of a job, and I'm sure there'll be another one will come pop. Smiley's playing this week in the reserves. It won't be too long till he gets in, and he's more midfield time than Lawler. So Lawler, who is more that forward who will run through the midfield and be that more dusty type. Smiley is more your Patrick Cripps. Once he plays midfield, he's playing midfield. So it's he's one that I'm sort of just waiting to see. And we still haven't seen Bo Allen as well, who can go between defender and midfield. So there are a couple highly touted guys that we haven't got yet. Caleb, hey Swizz, have 400k in the bank, you lucky ducky, before trades. Going short, Hasty and Patton to Zorko, Moraes and Humpty leaves me with 100k for next week. If I need Baz, I'll downgrade to Horn Francis to him next week. Thoughts? Yeah, that's fine. Like the hard thing is the Horn Francis Baz split is obviously going to cost money, but and I think Baz probably, it wouldn't be surprised me if they score similar this week. but I think Baz at home against Melbourne, it could be a bit of a statement for Geelong, especially with the fact that Geelong on the rebound. Melbourne supporters will know this. I think it was 2011 off the top of my head. What was the Geelong Melbourne massacre down at Geelong when I think Geelong lost to North Melbourne the week before, and that might have been a bit of a shock loss to them, and they came out and then beat Melbourne by, what was it, 186 points, something ridiculous. Now, I don't think Geelong are going to come out and do that this week, but the way the D's are playing, they'd want to show a little bit more than what they did last week, and Bailey Smith could be a huge part of that. And even if you is there a world where you could just get Buzz and maybe instead of Humpty, if that's the way you want to go? Because probably Baz is slightly more safer than what Humpty is, just because obviously he's proven. But then that obviously misses out on Zorko in the score. But I'm just thinking maybe out loud, like, is it, say, a Max Holmes or somebody like that a little cheaper that you could get on there? But I still don't mind it. Like, I understand why some people still want to fade Baz. Like, I've been playing around with that idea too. So, but Zorko, Sinclair, if you're going to get them, you've got to get moved now. So, I don't mind it. That's fine, mate. There's so many options. The hard thing is this is the big make and break week in rankings. And I was saying this the other night with Benny and the boys. The fact that there's one of these mid prices, we've already seen it happen, is not going to work out for people for whatever reason. And there is a part of me that does. I'm waiting to kind of get that more news about McGovern. Because at the moment it's still 2 to 4. I really hope they come out in the next day or two and be a bit more definitive about that. I don't think they will, but I really wish they came out and just say, it looks like it's going to be 4 weeks. But they're probably not going to say that because they don't want to leave. Like, West Coast needs some sort of hope at the moment. They look like their captain's leaving. Harley Reid doesn't give a stuff, so they need to cling to something. But if I knew he's not there for a month, I really do prefer Marriage over Humphrey for that reason. But I'm leaning towards Humphrey just because obviously North Melbourne and Richmond coming up in the next couple of weeks. But they're definitely the fact that he's got the kick-ins. And as I said earlier, I don't mind the people if you're trying to maybe go both, because I think one really does work out. The other one might not, but at least if you've got both, you're kind of hedging your bets a little bit. Wouldn't be surprised that people are going to probably go one and the other one's the one that really goes off. And then all of a sudden, the rankings are going to be massively different because of that. Hey, rookie coach. Mate, I'm good. My voice is a little bit hoarse, but we're pulling through here. So no, I'm going well. Would you trade Horne-Francis? As I said, Horne-Francis, I think the trade was last week. Saints home. I think he's going to rebound this week. But anyway, Horne-Francis and Fraser to get Smith, Whitfield, and the Murrays. Whitfield you could hold, but I don't mind it. Or what are you saying? Keep Fridge and go Horne-Francis to Baz, SPP to Marriage, and also Campo for Murrays. The hard thing with trading SPP is that he's going to make cash this week, but I get that. I'd probably, which way would I rather go? Horne-Francis, you can hit Smith, Whitfield. Well, Whitfield's going to be a top guy. Marriage could make cash, but I'd probably go Horne. If you got to choose between it, I'd probably going Horne-Francis, Fraser to get Smith and Whitfield. Because we know Whitfield's going to be a top. As long as Whitfield's fit, he's a top 6. And Bailey Smith, as long as he'll be in the mark, he could still be a top 3, 4 if he's fit. Wouldn't be surprised me. He could be number 1. It's just about how much he gets managed at different points through the season. So at least you're bringing in a couple keepers there. Just the thing is, obviously, in a perfect world, if you could try, even if you could somehow do it where it's Fraser to Smith, and I'm trying to think who you could trade in to do that. If you didn't have Bice, for example, maybe you could get on somebody like that as your defender, and then you could just maybe do a restructure, get Fraser to say Smith, or if you could just hold Fraser, and I'm trying to think, is there another guy that you could get up to? But I'm gathering that's your only options there. So. I'll say the first one, even though the other one with Marriage probably makes more cash going forward. I think getting that premium Whitfield, especially next week, could go 130 easy. Andrew Swiss, do I trade Neil out for Libba and Sheasel for Sinclair? It's a no for me on the Libba trade. Libba's flying, but geez, there's a lot on his shoulders at the moment. Bont, there's talk that it could be a little bit more of a setback. Treloar's obviously had a setback. Actually, I was talking to his actually, I keep saying his cousins, but one of them was like, no, it's actually, I think stepsister. She was like, it just, but one of the others was saying, kind of call it a cousin. But so I was actually out with her on Saturday night. I was asking her, and she's like, yeah, he's had a real setback there. So it is good for Libba, and obviously Richard's in there. The problem is, it's a lot to ask for Libba to continue to put those scores. The thing is with Neil too, is you wanted Neil for this week, for this game, against Richmond. Like, it could be a smashing. He's done this so many times against the Tigers, and though I hope that we put up some resistance, if he's going to score big at any given week, it's this week. If he doesn't, then maybe we have to have a real conversation about who we're turning Neil into. But yeah, this is not the week to trade him. And Sheasel for Sinclair. I don't mind that, because at least Sheasel is dropping, he's going to still drop 40, 50, 60, 70, 80K over the next couple of weeks. Sinclair, if you want him, this is the last chance to get him. So I can live with that one, just because you're going to be priced out as Sinclair. And once he gets to if he gets anywhere near that 650 mark, it's just too hard to bring him in as a defender. So I probably live with that one more than I can live with your first one, mate. Murray, because the hard thing is, sorry, on Andrew, before we go on that, you got situations where everybody else is bringing other guys in. So I did say you could probably use one, maybe two trades to side swap, because we got so many. The problem was, obviously, one of those trades maybe have burnt to Lindsay for those people who are trading him out. But you probably do have that one to kind of fix your team with a premium to a premium. So I think Sheasel to Sinclair is probably the one that's going to do that for you. But there are other people going to obviously be trying to bring in players that are making cash. Murray was, hey guys, bringing in Baz and Bias, thinking skipping Murray's to go short to Whitfield. Yeah, Short's history against Brisbane is absolutely pathetic. So there was a part of me that in a perfect world I would have loved to keep Short. I kept him last week because he was playing St Kilda, and even against St Kilda, where he's, that's going to be the best game for him. He 89 is his best score in a while, but it was only an 89. Like, if he's going to put up a 110, that was the week to do it. Now his break even gets up to, and it's just slowly leaking cash. But I have to have a look at this history against Brisbane, which is enough to scare you off. So 54, 48, 74 is his last three games against the Lions. That's enough for me to go, yeah, no thanks. No thanks at all. Now, I know a couple of them are at the Gabba, a little bit more room at the MCG and everything, but no. So it does have a little bit better of a record against Freo, and especially against the Suns. But by then, the damage is done. Like, if he came out and scored a 50 this week against the Lions, you just look straight off there. All of a sudden, it's 20K, but his break even comes out. Now it's, it's starting to, it should be starting to get up there. I thought it'd be more than that. Let's just actually have let's just have a look at that. If I put in 25, does that, yeah, interesting. I don't know why it's actually doing that. I think there's, let's just double check. They're saying 6K, but I'm saying, yeah, his break even should go more than that. So let's just, what's conservative here? Maybe 60. Break even comes out at 88. It's not terrible, is it? But I think then it'll probably, I'm just worried if he then puts up, like, even it's another poor score. He's nearly flattened out. That's probably the problem. That's probably why his projections aren't actually going as bad. But the fact of all of a sudden we've got this guy that's probably going to be like low 400s, and kind of what are you going to do with him? I just think he's now gone. Like, that was the week to get him. So yeah, move him on for sure. Whitfield, Sinclair, any of them that you want to go. So fine there. I'm interested about those break evens. I thought he might drop more, but I guess when you've pretty well bottomed out, there's nowhere to go. Murray, Jesus, we've just talked about that. We've mentioned you. Hey, thanks for coming on, Supercoach God. Great catching up with you as always. Yes, marriage. Who we got here? Brady Cool. Marriage has been training as a distributor all preseason. Yes, and that's why I was looking at him for preseason. I did talk about him preseason. I did have him in my West Coast summary. The problem was they made him sub that first freaking game. So frustrating. So they wanted in the hand. So yes, that's why he is definitely high on my list this week. And I just want to kind of get a little bit more clarity around McGovern. That's all. But I think he's still going to get kick-ins anyway, as I talked about earlier. Angeline, hey Swizz, hope you're well. I am. I've gone McGovern to Whitfield. Yep, makes sense. Who joins Zorko, Sinclair, Robertson, Shees. It feels sideways, but you can't hold McGovern. Currently ranked 3,000. You are flying. Don't need my advice. No, that's you. No, I appreciate you coming on anyway. And you'll find these guys out here because it's becoming best 22. Yes, Trainer and Reed. Now this is a worthy little discussion here. Yes, Bice going well. Sydney players coming back. Training comes down and scores a 90, was against St Kilda. Reed 88 against a very poor standard game, in a poor standard game against a very poor Port Adelaide, who didn't have a forward line. We're not going to get that every week from these three guys. I think some people will be setting up their team thinking, great, I've got Bice, Trainer, and Reed. I can just, have two of these on. I don't think I'm seeing too many teams with three, but definitely two. And what will end up potentially happening is, you're going to have Trainer maybe against the Lions not score so well. Reed, he's not playing this week, comes out next week. What happens if he doesn't score so well? What happens if Bice out of the side in sort of 3 weeks' time? And then people are going to be kind of stuck in this situation. Maybe you've still got Cos, who's playing really well. Maybe Colo comes back and it does affect him, but it's fine. He looks fine at the moment. But trying to have this sort of situation with the true rookies on field, I think it probably does set you up with a potential bit of failure. Yes, you do have the flex to cover. So that is one thing. But when you've sort of got these other rookies, that's where I want to use the kind of the flex position or even flex around these, loopholing some of these guys. Like this week, if I'm Hewitt, who's probably the one that I move on, I can Pal Pepper plays first, I think it is. I should get that right before I actually say it. Stone plays first, so I can have Stone with the emergency on. If he looks like he's scoring well, I can just bench Pal Pepper. If he's not, Pal Pepper just stays in the field. And I would rather sort of play around with forward rookies with a flex covering those guys than I do one, because all of a sudden I think, we know these defender rookies. And I only have to have a look back 2 weeks ago when they were putting up 30s. So I kind of don't want those guys on the field. I'm happy to sort of one. And there's a part of me, if I can make it work, or in a perfect world, I'd love to be able to, one of these guys miss at any point, so I could just sort of loophole. I'm sure there'll be a player that will open up like that, or even and this is another reason why I'm waiting off this whole Clark Whitfield thing, because I just want to have another look at what happens to Steve Bice, make sure he plays well, keeps his spot. Any player could get injured. We looked at what happened at Lindsay last week, so maybe it's if I have to move one of these guys out to bring in Clark or Whitfield, but most likely Clark, I could potentially keep O'Connell and then just use him as a loophole for that 6 and 7, D6 and D7. So, I think it's definitely people are loading up on this on defenders and pretty well going to have a lot of these premiums. And so Angelina, who's ranked really high, she's going to be like me. So, I won't have Whitfield, but I'll probably have Clark. We'll both have Zorko, Sinclair, Robertson, Sheasel, and then it comes down to those sort of two people. And that's the thing, you'll see a lot of these top ranked players, and I think that puts you in the top 2%. So if you're currently 10,000 or 12,000, 15,000 chasing these pack, it's going to be hard to chase when you've got sort of these guys. Hey, Kev, loved your work as always. Thank you. No problems, mate. I do appreciate you coming on. Good cricket buddy there, mate. Jason Hall Francis is a hard watch. He is really hard watch. The thing is, Butters, how does Butters, we've been saying that it comes back and affects him. It usually affects him in a positive way, even though he gets less midfield time. And this is why I'm really the consideration about trading Rosie. The high break even, what happens now, Butters comes in that midfield, and Rosie kind of might be that one that's pushed out, or, shares time with Horn Francis or some of these other guys that they have in there. But he is a really hard watch. Like, his confidence looked shot in that second and third quarter. He wasn't chasing his fitness, but the fact that he's been kicked in the media all this week, I can see the rebound game coming for sure, because players always seem to do that. Hey, Daniel, would you hold Petrarca? Yes, and there is a reason for that. And hope he gets dual position. Yes. I did have the percentages before. Somebody did send me in, and I believe he was pretty close. So I might come back to your question, because I'll try to find where I had it. I had all the percentages before when I was looking through it to see, but I know he was definitely on that list where he looks like getting forward status. Anything can change, and he could come in and play full midfield tomorrow. But I don't think that's going to be the situation because he's Langford's in there, Oliver's in there. You've still got guys like Viney. If Rivers runs through, so they do have plenty of options that can go through there at any kind of point. It's something to think about. Here we go. I knew I did have them. So forward, we're most likely getting Warner because he's at 39.7% at the moment, and Track is 36.8. So he's right on the cusp. So it does a lot come down to what happens this week, but you would hope that they continue to do the rotations and stuff like that. So can you hold, like, if it doesn't work out, just trade him next week? But there'd be nothing worse than trading him this week. He gets forward status, and all of a sudden you've got one of the best forwards in the game, and you've just traded him out. So on that, players who are definitely looking at getting different changes, and it's a great question anyway. So defense, we're definitely getting Foz. This is why Hamling, not much talk about him, but as long as he kept his spot, it's a big question. But he's a forward, he'll get defender status. Rory Laird is definitely getting defender status. So this is where it also comes interesting with this whole backline setup, because you'd have Laird available. Connor Stone is one I want to keep because he's going to get defender forward. So I like him a bit more than sort of a couple of these other guys like Hewitt, even for now. Josh Dacos is also getting defender status. Kamamiti, Shield, Silvani, and Boygoin. Mids, so we'll have a few guys going to the mid soon. McRae, Davidson, McKercher, Rankin, Fraser, if you've got him. So a couple of questions about Fraser before. You could definitely hold him if you've got the opportunity to, if that helps your team by the fact that you can move him around. The close one here is Bailey Humphrey at 33.6%. So hopefully he does play enough forward that enough mid-time that he does pick that up, because that would be unreal for our sides, especially if you bring in him. Sheasel's currently at 59% mid and 32% forward. So he'll get up the one which is the bigger percentage, which will be the midfield. Jack Martin too. DeConning will get ruck status. We've got forward line Henderson, Murphy Reid for those who have him, Harry Sharp, Lawler, Will Ashcroft is struggling at the moment, 29%. We do need him to play more forward this week. Marshall won't get it. Petrarca right on the cusp. Peatling will. That was Will Ashcroft, so he won't get it. Levi Ashcroft will. So Levi becomes a link there. And so we've got, and we've already talked about Davidson picking up midfield. So you can move Davidson and Levi Ashcroft around for sure. Saligo won't get it. Sid Draper will. Dangerfield will. Merritt would have to play nearly the whole game forward this week to get it, so probably not happening. Tooks at 25%. Sam Draper will. And I think that's it outside of us and Warner. So and that's why I don't mind the whole Humphrey and Marriage as well, as long as if they can get themselves up to 400k, because getting maybe a Warner or a Petrarca as the upgrading one of them to them would be amazing, because those guys will just become top guys in our forward line for sure. Kev, bringing in Sinclair, who should I trade out? Pryor, Reid, or Trainer? Also, who to trade out of Murray's, Lindsay or Nevitt? The thing with Nevitt, at least he's playing. If Nevitt is named sub, that's the easiest trade out ever. And we have to wait, obviously, to Friday night. If Nevitt is named on the field, it becomes a different story. And you probably go Lindsay just because, obviously, he's missing. Even though I think Lindsay's got the better role and whatever, at least Nevitt's playing in the short term. So that's the one there. Pryor, Reid, Trainer. You're probably going one of the Bombers. Maybe it's Pryor. Just because I think he's break even slightly less than what Reid and Trainers is. But that is a tough one. Do you need to trade one of those? Could you potentially trade Lindsay and Nevitt, move one of those? Kev, who do you actually have in your flex? Because could you potentially bring Sinclair in and just have him in your flex this week and not trade either a Pryor, Reid, or Trainer? Like that, have you thought about doing something around that? Corey, first boost this week. But unsure what to do with my team. Maybe hit me up, Cause. because you've probably got a lot going on. Feel free to find me on X2, guys, if you've got some other questions. I do my best answering. I do apologize if I don't get through everyone, especially if you are messaging me just before on a Thursday night or Friday evening. Nothing worse because I'm probably podcasting and then it's like, what the hell's going on? So don't try to hit me up at like 6:30 or something. Just hit me up during the day because I usually get a little bit more time to sort of flick through it. No other way to get Bailey Smith. Yep, I get it. He's not going to go up a huge amount, but it's still enough to go. You don't really want to be going to pay $440 for him next week. Aiden, not sure whether to use the third boost this week. I'm not against it. I'd probably prefer it and I'll use 2, but I get it. Some people are doing it. Probably a little excessive, yes. And you could easily hold Camperoli. I don't mind holding the Camperoli. The Greek Raven, yes, our international fan, and thank you so much for jumping on from the Philippines, mate. This week I've done something I've never done before. 2 sideways, 1 downgrade. Yeah, that's huge. It's like Chris last week. What are those, mate? Let us know. DMAC, who to trade out of Lindsay and Nevitt? I just answered that one. So wait until we see who, if Nevitt is named sub. Otherwise, if you've got to choose between, then go Lindsay. Because what happens if Lindsay is 2 weeks and all of a sudden you could have held Nevitt for those couple of weeks? Carter, boost Kako. Oh, I don't know about boosting Kako, but okay, Kako to marriage. Lindsay to marriage. Yeah, okay. Kako to Smith. And okay, hang on, I'll go look at this one. Boost Kako and then to marriage. Lindsay to marriage. Oh, no, Kako to Smith. Geez, Lindsay to Smith or no boost. I'm kind of a little bit confused on how you've worded that, Carter. I'm sure there's an easier way of just writing that. Carter, if you're on X, hit me up, Switch26. Maybe even screenshot me your team. That might be the easiest way to do that one. Hey, G-Bags, thoughts on whether I should trade Jason Horne-Francis to Rankin? Geez, Rankin's good. I'm so glad I ended up getting him. Or whether I should move him to marriage and then trade Stone to Humphrey. Yeah, I did say this is the debate. So I think one of them goes off and it's sort of safety in numbers because you have the 2 there and one works out, one doesn't. So otherwise you're kind of hedging your bets. But I can't ignore the fact that bringing in a premium is so much better because at least they're locked in. And in the case of Rankin and like the Whitfield question before, if they're playing their top 6, pretty well Whitfield and Rankin are top 3. Rankin looks so good. He's pretty been running around in 2nd and 3rd gear so far this season. He's up against his old team. He's going to rip a team a new one soon. So I think the Horne-Francis to Rankin's probably the better move there, just because you are getting that premium guy. Wouldn't surprise me, however, this week, Horne-Francis, comes out and as I've been saying it, been beaten in the media. They're all after him. Comes out and scores a 110 plus. I think if there's going to be a week, it's going to be this week that he's going to do it. And he could potentially match Rankin. But I think long-term, Rankin's going to outscore Horne-Francis for sure. Joshua, top 5 must-have defenders. Zorko, yes. Whitfield, yes. Sinclair, yes. Roberts, yes. Bice. Yeah, Bice not so much because they've got players coming back. It's only going to take a couple poor games where he could find himself out of the side, but he looks really good, and they want him to have the kick-ins and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say Bice is a must-have, but I think you've nailed it on those premium guys. Even Roberts isn't a must-have. Like he's going really well, but he'll be one of those guys that's probably going to be like the 10th, 12th guy, just happy to have. And if we get a luxury trade at some point throughout the season, you could potentially move him. But the top guys are Zorko, Whitfield, Sinclair. I still think Sheasel bounces back in there. And I think Geordie Clark, Bailey Dale are in that 5th, 6th. I said Bailey Dale was going to have that bad game this week. Carlton were always going to put attention into him, but he will respawn, guys. Don't worry. If you brought him in this week, don't worry. He will go. Fine. So, hey, mate, I don't really like Cheese. I don't really want to get rid of Cheese, but I need his money to get to Baz. Like if you need it and there's another guy so it's not just Baz, but you're bringing in other guys, I can understand it. But at the same time, you'd want to be bringing in another, not just Baz, you want to bring in a defender who's also a premium. So if it meant like say She's down to Holmes, and then that money helped you get to Baz, that's a different story. But if it's just She's down to Baz and you're getting another mid-pricer in somewhere, meh. I'm not a huge fan. I miss the She's who used to average 136. He'll bounce back. He will. Clarko's just trying him on a couple of different things. We knew this, going to happen. He's still getting the ball. There's going to be games where he'll come back fine. Non-owners would be loving this. That's just the way some of these goes. And like the kid's a star. He's a genuine star, so he'll work through this. The reason why he scored 150 because he kicked that goal in the last minute. I'm trying to think who you talked about. Oh yeah, Dacos. Exactly. So I talked about earlier that Dacos isn't the right VC option this week because he will get the Hewitt tag, and Carlton do a pretty good job of containing him. I think his brother, that's the one for like a draft stars. His brother's going to, I think he could go off. And the big ones in that midfield, I think Chris probably has his best game of the year. And wouldn't surprise Chera again. Goes pretty well in that midfield. As long as Carlton actually play them on the field. Geez, their time on ground was so bad last week. I'm pretty sure I had the rant about it on Friday, but their time on ground just ridiculous. If the Blues are any chance this week, that especially that last quarter where Walsh and Chera played like 66 and 67%, they've got to play 80% in that last quarter to be any chance against the Pies. Scored 2,029 last week. Well done, mate. Reasonably happy with the team. Think I'm going to hold onto a boost and straight chain Leak and Camper to buy some arrays. Cool. Making some cash, mate. Loving it. Jay, is it worth trading in Moraes for Sardis or Lindsay? I'd actually hold Sardis because what was the news coming out? I think Parrish might have had a setback. There was another injury around there for the Bombers. I'm sure I did hear something. The young fella, the forward, but that's not about that. But that's sad news about Edwards as well. But I'm sure I did hear something. I know I was talking about the Bombers. Caldwell. Didn't he have some issue happening as well? So I think the Bombers have actually got a couple issues happening there. So if you can hold Sardis, I did say this week, if you could hold last week, in a perfect world, you could hold Sardis. I think could pay dividends. No problems. I think that's the way to go. Also, is Horne-Francis the Smith a must? No, it isn't. It is actually not a must. Getting Horne-Smith is not a must either. You can fade him. I think it's better. It's better to have him in because we saw what he can do in the first week, and I think we're all fearful that he's playing Melbourne. But I think it could average out. Yes, he's going to be up around that mark, but especially if we get Warner and we've got these other forward options, would it surprise me if he's top 3 and he's F1? No, but it surprised me if he's F10, 11, 12, just because games he gets rested and managed and all that sort of stuff, which we've already seen. No, wouldn't surprise me as well. The guy did have a limited preseason, and he's still coming back from an ACL guy, so it's not the end of the world if you fade. But trying to burn a trade to go Horne-Francis the Smith, as I said, it would not surprise me if Horn. I get it because we watched Horne-Francis so poor last week, but he's one of those guys that Horne-Francis will turn it around as well. It's a hard one to go and do that trade, and I think the hard thing is they could match each other, as I said about the whole Rankin thing. It was a risk last week, but I was backing the fact that I thought Horne-Francis would do what he did. I was actually annoyed because he probably should have only. There's a world he should have only scored 60, and I could have got that 100 points from him to Sinclair. But I do think he does bounce back this week. Paul Hayes was all thoughts. Thanks for the content. No problems, mate. Would you trade one of Gawn or Cherry? No, but keeping TDK and Perryman for Sinclair and one more defender or Rankin plus. So do you have all 3 of them? Would you trade one of Gawn or Cherry? Okay, so that's a different situation. You do have 3. If that means maybe balancing up your side, the hard thing is Gawn. This could be his best week again, but I get it. So maybe Gawn that's the Sinclair and one more, and then the fact that you could use that money to also get Rankin. I think that's a good trade because you're getting rid of Perriman too. I don't mind that. But you can't get rid of TDK. Cherry's been cleared, so that's fine. The hard thing is here, Paul. Actually, I'll go. I might go the other way. I might go the other way here because the problem is Pittonet is now 1 week away. And with Carlton, their issues, and Harry Mackay, does Pittonet get back in as early as next week? This is the major way. Now, probably not next week because they're playing West Coast, but there's a chance. There is a chance. And does that mean we've got to look at the case of TDK? Once Pittonet gets in, how much does it affect his scores? And if he's in there for a period of time, does that mean TDK gets moved on? So you're probably in the best case of keeping Gawn, Cherry, and TDK to see what happens, because in 2 weeks' time, there'll be nothing worse. Pittonet comes back, starts playing a bit more ruck, and TDK is the one playing forward, even though that's the worst move Carlton can make. And I've talked to Carlton supporters about this, and they don't want to see it, but you can see it happening now. And the way Vols's coaching, nothing would surprise me. And then, all of a sudden, TDK's, comes back to an 80 guy, and all of a sudden you're like, well, geez, I wish I kept Gawn or Cherry. So definitely Perryman, if you can move him and maybe not camp to Moraes, but maybe it's a Nevitt or a Lindsay or something like that to get the cash to get Perryman up. Maybe there's a way you can do it there. But yeah, maybe if you can keep all 3 rucks and keep them one in the flex, I'd probably do that. Hey, Ben, well, you can record your team anytime. Wednesday night's my night, mate. Dead End Marriage and Humphrey, 270K. Fraser and SDK were 100K more. Yeah, and that's probably the good thing about the fact that these guys are cheaper. So, they're more likely to make good scores. They scored 233. I don't know what that's in relation to. Lincoln. Tristan, is it more important to get in Baz and 2 of Marriage, Moraes, and Humphreys, or Baz, Moraes, and Sinclair? I always say get in the premium. Sinclair, definitely, mate. You got to get the premium in. Hey, Foz, we've got a few. Oh, you know what? The one person that nobody has talked about in this, let me scroll down and see if anybody's brought him up, because we're getting a lot of the similar questions here. Oh, yes, Carter. Yes, you did. Sent you a message on Twitter. I'm pretty sure. Did I? Hope I answered that, Carter. I really do hope I was just double check I'm going through. So I do get a lot of messages. So my apologies that it hasn't just come straight to my mind. Nobody has asked about Matty Rowell. And maybe everyone got burnt about it last week. I'm actually genuinely shocked that nobody's asked about Rowley. It was like last week, I think nobody had asked was about Short, and then everybody started posting in the chat about that. So it's Rowell, break even of 53. I get the problem where some people were burnt last year because he obviously came out of the blocks flying, and he has played 2 of the weaker teams already. So it is definitely something of a consideration. Like, you have a look at his start compared to the rest of the year, and let's have a look here. So this was his last year's score. So had the 137, 155, 99. Then they had 129, 135, 126, 136, averaging 137 after 7 weeks. Absolutely flying. Has the poor game against Brisbane. No surprise there. Does rebound. Goes through a little section. But then after that, becomes quite poor after the bye, and then has a little recovery at the end of the season. So I think a lot of people, because they were owning him, brought him in late, and then, hung on, and then you got that kind of those scores. Yeah, that was obviously a big problem. So no sort of surprise why some people are hesitant, because you do get that sort of situation there. However, here is a guy for 2025 again. So he's had 2 weak oppositions. He did score a 155 against Adelaide last year, which was home. His scores against North have never been that great, but in this current form, you could see him definitely go more. And even against the Tigers, apart from the 137, he's had a couple lower scores. I'd be backing him to absolutely dominate Richmond. So they've got him going projected 140. I don't think it probably goes that well this week. But even if it's sort of, let's go like, what's that, 110? Because I think, he's good enough to go. So even the next 3 weeks at 110 or 114, it's not even about the cash, it's about the points. So cool. He goes up slightly more. Like, it's not a huge amount, but it's enough. But if he was to have the massive score this week, and this is the problem, if he goes big, all of a sudden you're paying 580, still attainable. Hard thing is we're starting to look at day costs and players like that. But against sort of these teams, like, we know he can go big. The problem is, it does have obviously Brisbane and Hawthorn there. But up in Darwin, the wet conditions, contested footy, he could still, if with this new sprint coach, there's no reason why he couldn't actually start going well and being, a top, well, even higher than a top 6 mid. Like Raoul's got the game that he could one day be the number one guy and just break out. And would not surprise me. Like, he's only owned by 4%, and he could be the one where all of a sudden, like just a bizarre situation where Matty Raoul after 8 weeks is top 3 mid and nobody's on him. So yeah, I know we're all looking at defenders, and we've probably got, because we've got all these midfield rookies. But yeah, geez, Matt Raoul, if he goes berserk this week, he could definitely be one to miss out on. He's there is 10,000 coaches traded in him, but it's only 152 coaches from the top 1%. So that's kind of a bit more of a story. Everyone's getting Murray's, Humphrey, Smith marriage first. So yeah, just something a little bit interesting there. All right. Hey, Sean, Jason Horne-Francis might not even make the top 6. That is something to be considered. Yeah, Track and Warner, like McRae's there, Caleb Daniels there. So we do have some options already that are locked in. Rankin, of course. So Rankin, McRae, Daniel, and then if you're right, if you get Track, you get Warner. All of a sudden, it's getting a little bit small, that forward line. It might come down to Horne-Francis versus Smith as the 6th guy. Maybe there's somebody else that we haven't thought about. I've said this, my other half has been on Darcy. Even if we kind of look at the forwards at the moment who are flying, and maybe I'll just get that up for a second there, our top forwards, because though key forwards, it's hard to keep it up. Darcy just looks like an absolute beast up there at the moment. So where was our average? Luke Jackson's another one. Like, it's harder because obviously Shrek will come back at some point, but 15% are on him, and this is what he does. Like we saw it last year, and he's just going to keep getting better and better because you consider his age. Jai Simpkins coming out of the blocks. He's playing that mid-forward role, absolutely to a T at the moment. One that actually, he was the one that towed up the Indigenous All-Stars game. So Simpkin could be in for a career year this year, and just flying under the radar. 6% did jump on him. Darcy's 7%, so he's flying. Be interesting to see he continues. After that, I think some of these other guys possibly drop off and whatever. Jack Graham playing midfield, potentially could keep going, but I don't think he's pushing top 6. But yeah, would not surprise me at all. Luke Jackson and even Jai Simpkin, could be in that sort of mix, especially for top 10, and how that all, all depends on how many games some of these players get and play. So, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge yet. And would not surprise me if some of these there's a couple other players that sort of stand out. We always see players pick up dual position, and then they rival some of the guys we have. What are your thoughts on Fraser? If you've got the ability to hold, it's no problems at all. Like as I said, Treloar's had a bigger setback. So his top 3 premium targets for the next 3 weeks. So defense, I'll give you a top probably from each line. So defense is Jordan Clark from next week, as I've said about that draw. If not, obviously you've got Whitfield and a couple of others. But I think Jordan Clark's draw completely opens up. Now, he's not the top 4, but he's in that range for 5th and 6th forward. So I think it's him. Then the midfield's got to be Nick Dacos if you don't have him. It's just the obvious one, with especially Anzac Day after he's gone through that Brisbane and that tag. But he's definitely one that needs to be looked at for sure. And then the forward line will be Warner when he gets forward status. So they're the 3 obvious ones that we've got to kind of plan around having, I think. So even if it's not Clark and you've got enough defenders, that might be it. And in regards to a fallen premium too, Stewart from the defense has to be, because he had that 9 in his score. So you might pick up that cheaper D5 or D6 for potentially as low as 400k. So there might be a bit of a plan around him as well. You got to kind of think holding on. I'm trying to hold off on my mids because Butters and Bont, we expect to at least average as the top 6-8 premiums when they finally come back. So do I try to get them before the buy, after the buy? But I think at some point I'm going to want Bont and Butters. So that's why I'm not so much with my chasing my midfielders at the moment, because a couple of the midfielders I want aren't available. So I'm a little bit holding back in regards to that. as well. But yeah, I think that's a couple that open up for sure. Thanks, Fancast, and that will be Dave. Thanks, mate. Always love it. The work that we've done together, mate. Check them out if you haven't already. Lewis, I did say earlier, I haven't 100% confirmed my trade. So for me, the outs I know. It's so I am trading, like, unless something completely changes over the next 24 hours, Rosie and Short are gone for me, because I'm fixing my structure. I should say, trading premiums, but Rosie, after last week's performance, he can go to hell, and Short, he's not a premium. So those two can go. And then it just depends what are these. So if Nevitt was named sub, it's Nevitt. If he isn't, I'm looking at trading Hewitt. So I'm going to use my second boost, them going. And then the plan is Bailey Smith, Moraes, and then one of Humphrey and Marriage. I'm just waiting to see if I get more news out of West Coast, depending on which way I go there. And then that banks enough cash so I can get Jordan Clark in next week. So effectively, I'm turning Rosie and Short into, side swap to Clark, and then it's get, the Bailey Smith, and also try to get that either Humphrey or Marriage, who I think will make enough cash that, I can upgrade them, and hopefully even in Marriage's case, maybe side swap to a Stewart, or not put 100K and get him to a Warner anyway. So, I don't mind, especially Short, because he's doing nothing for our sides anyway. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. It's actually come up to 2 hours. Did not realize it's nearly 2 hours. I need to actually think about, getting some sleep before work tomorrow. What's wrong with Sheasel this season? Just the role he's playing. So he's playing similar to Rankin. It's just a role that he's, probably not as used to. He's still finding the ball, but playing that link-up role probably doesn't suit him as much for North Melbourne. Adelaide, it's a different story. Rankin gets that ball in that role, and he's hitting up the three-headed monster. And then they've got the smalls. So where Sheasel, North Melbourne, a bit more pressure, rushed. They've got Larky, and then it's like Darling and some makeshift smalls kind of situation. Like Curtis has actually been playing well so far, so credit to him. But it's a bit of a difference kicking to that North Melbourne forward line, where when he was playing defence, like if he's in the middle, he's now hitting up Cherry, LDU, Simpkin. He's hitting up better players who have probably got themselves out, and he's also got time to make those kicks where you're more rushed. Think about the Dawson situation. So obviously a younger kind of Dawson, where when you get him forward to that centre, when Dawson was probably playing that more, a little bit drop back quarterback, had more time in the midfield, and he's kicking, got time to kick the ball, his Supercoach numbers were through the roof. We've seen over the last sort of year, and there was an injury part to that too with Dawson. But the pressure comes, doesn't have as much time to make those kicks. Also, all of a sudden, his DTs are like 130, Supercoach drops to 110. So Sheasel's in that sort of boat where there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen as well, because they do have Tom Powell, who's taking up a lot of that midfield time. You got LDU, Sheasel is that bit of a point of difference, but then they've got Simpkin as well. So they've sort of got four midfielders, and so he's still finding it 25 times, but if he doesn't hit that target every time like he does in defense, all of a sudden he scores 90. He's not scoring 110, 120, 130 like he does. So like he'll get better for it. It's probably from a football and a North Melbourne perspective better that he probably learns a little bit of that role, and that's probably why Clarko's doing it. From a Supercoach point of view, it's frustrating. The thing is, at any given point, and it would not surprise me as early as this week, that he kind of moves back and plays more off half back. So I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of happens. But I do get the situation. The great row, Sheasel to Sinclair, Richards to Rao. Yeah, the weapon, and Horn Francis to Smith. It's sidey, but it's the sort of sidey that probably pays off, especially for Richards. But I don't know if I like that so much. But geez, I like the ins. I just hate the way you've had to do it. But geez, I like the ins. Yes, Carter. Yeah. It's Matt. Sometimes you got to let your team settle. Yeah, and I get that as well. Some people do react because you see one poor score or two scores, and that's why I'm not. Sheasel. The Rosie situation is different because Rosie I was never planning to keep, and I never looked at him as a premium. Jaden Short was the same as well. I was hopeful that they could match premium scores for a while, but Rosie now is just going to lose cash out of that, and especially once Butter's back, he loses that role completely and becomes like a 90 to 100 guy, maybe slightly more. So it could have been any more disappointing his game the other day. And that's why if I can turn them into players that potentially are going to be, top of their line, that's probably a bit more of it. There is a thought, and I have thought about it, like, could I just go Rosie to Rao? I don't actually mind that so much because, as Rowley's so good to watch too. So good to watch live. It's just a shame the Suns don't play much games in Melbourne. One of the reasons I did go and watch the other day, because getting to actually watch him and Anderson in the flesh was great. Is Bice worth a boost? No, I don't think so. I'd probably boost Moraes. Like, he's good. He's going to get score, but it depends who you're boosting in that back line as well. But probably not. Like, there is, you're going to get money out of him, but it's just about how long. So, like, it's not, you could do it, but it's not like a must do. Jonas, here we go. Slick Willie settled nuts in the best players in the VFL. Well, yeah, he's way better than those guys. But is Essendon doing was it a reset, a rebuild? But I said this other day, Setterfield, sure, he's got to get an opportunity. I'm with you on that one, Jonas. Outleaked Foss and Lawler in Bice, Rao and Moraes. Yes, cool. Yes, somebody who's that? Wire it up. Yeah, Rowley. I would love to get a bit of Matt Rowell on my side. Just don't know if this is the hard thing, because I want the way I want the rookies, but the forwards. The only problem is then I can't go Humphrey or a Marriage and a Bailey Smith. I'd have to be all in Rowell, and he probably doesn't outscore the two combined, so that is probably a problem. Murray getting in Bice and Baz, thinking skipping Humphrey, Marriage, and Moraes to go short to Whitfield. Yes. Short to Whitfield. No problems at all. Kev, thanks. No problems, mate. I've traded Nevitt and Lindsay to get Sinclair at flex. Excellent, mate. It's the last chance to get him in. Anderson will outscore Rail by season's end. Yeah, Matt. And I know as captain, and he's the other one too, that you've probably got to watch. Anderson looks so good as well. Both of them, both of them in there. And it wouldn't be surprised me once Flanders gets some fitness that, hopefully he drops down enough price, like 500K. He's probably the forgotten one here of our defenders. Like, would not surprise me at all if Flanders turns it around at some point throughout the season. But yeah, this whole, Rao, I think Rao more stays. Rao just needs to see performances from the Suns. If they're in the mix for finals, I think he stays. If they're not, he's out the door. I think that's where it kind of sits with Rowley. Just that sort of person. He wants success. A lot of these top things. So what round will we start calling Essendon? I was probably calling them last week that. Even though they did have the win against Port. I don't see them being anything but bottoms around that bottom six mark. Not as bad as my boys, West Coast, Melbourne. The great thing, if you're a Bombers supporter, you've got Melbourne's pick. Geez, they are awful. They are. Sorry, Melbourne supporters, but I've watched you guys twice already this season, and I couldn't be any less impressed with how you guys are playing. The wheels have completely fallen off there. Matty John, thanks on thoughts on Jason Horne-Francis, short and hasty to Bailey Smith, Rowell, and Moraes. Bank 2-1. The fact that you're banking money too as well. And you're saying tossing up again, getting rid of Horne-Francis or Richards. I'd probably keep Richards for now over Horne-Francis. At least the roles there. Like, Richards was one of those guys that we thought we could absolutely break out. And he's still looking fairly good. I'd back him in, give him more of an opportunity there. Here's an interesting one, Bradley. Yeah, Holmes over Clark. He is he's purring at the moment. He's looked really good. Chris and I were talking about him the other day. It's kind of not surprised, and because we know he was quite good. I did write about him last year in the Herald Sun. So I was a big fan of Max Holmes last year. I just think he's kind of slightly more capped than some of the other guys. But I probably should be a little bit more hotter on him than what I am. That Geelong midfield, he's looking good, and he's in the mix. Like, as I said earlier, you've got the top guys, Sinclair, Zorko, Whitfield. Like maybe Sheasel does continue to drop off, and maybe it's not him, and it's just those sort of three guys, and then Clark pushes up into that, and then maybe Flanders, does he get himself together? Does Holmes sort of stay around the mark? Bailey Dell stays around that mark. You could have sort of guys sort of 4, 5 to 10, very similar. Wouldn't surprise me, Dome. So the fact that he's a bit cheaper, yeah, sure. But I'd rather Clark, especially because he's draw. But at some point, like, I think later in the season, especially that run home for Geelong. It's so good with Holmes. The hard thing is he's probably their best midfielder, so he's going to get attention at some point, and that's just my other worry about Holmes, which he's going to have a couple of downer games compared to these halfbacks that just run around and do whatever they want. And this is the other Jonas Goat, you and I are very similar on our thinking. I'm turfing Rosie. Yeah, the round 12 bye. And I get that's why some people are probably thinking Richards as well, and a little bit why I did Horn Francis, because I was waiting to see what would open up. And and I'm probably in the lucky part because I don't have Cherry at the moment, but I'm probably going to want Cherry at some point. So I've got to think about that as well, about how many of these round 12 guys. So moving Rosie now to free that up, and it does set up my buy structure better as we go on as well. So a little bit of a thought there. So I do like that. Guys, we have hit 2 hours. That'll do tonight. Thank you to everybody that's been on. As always, I'll be back Friday before the lead up for the Geelong Melbourne game. What a winner that will be, but hopefully, good luck, Carlton Collingwood. I will pick the Pies tomorrow night. I'm going to pick them by 6 goals because I don't give Carlton any real hope at the moment. But yeah, no, again, Supercoach Insider 100 for the three of us. Swizz 26 for me directly, guys, is the best way to get me. Max, last question. I'm doing Horn Francis, Rosie Foss to rank Whitfield bias good. Ed Allen going to play. I think he's he's the first emergency mate, so most unlikely. Liam, beautiful guys. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon. Catches.